All right, this is exciting. I got to tell you guys that when I asked to do this, I said I wanted a small room off to the side, just a little small session. And they're like, oh, you're on the main stage, so enjoy yourself. I'm like, oh, appreciate that. But I'm really excited to be here, to be able to share with you some strategies on how you can build your threat intelligence program, whether you're just starting out or you're world-class already. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this. And the first place that I really want to start is why? Why are you here? What is it for you that helps you get up every single day and do what you do? And are you really connected with that why? And are you connected with the mission of your company? You see, the mission at CareFirst is to provide affordable health care to everyone, regardless if they can pay for it or not. And there's something about that statement, even though it's a little toned down version than what's on the slide, it gives me tingles every time I say it, because I'm connected to that why. So let me say it one more time. The mission of CareFirst is to provide affordable access to health care, regardless if they can pay for it or not. And I just think, wow, that's something I can get behind. That's something I can stand for. That's a company I want to work for. And I want to tell a real quick story about how I met the president and CEO, Brian Pennick. I had been with the company for about a year, and I work remote. I'm out of North Carolina, out of Raleigh. So they said, mandatory, got to come into the office. I'm like, okay, jump on a plane, fly in. I land about 6:30. I'm at the CareFirst building at 7 o'clock in Canton. And if any of you are familiar with the Baltimore area, a big giant CareFirst building there, it overlooks the Inner Harbor. It's a pretty amazing building, and the view is incredible. But nobody's in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning, so I go up to the 16th floor, and I'm looking around, and I see some stairs that go up to the 17th floor, so I jump up to the 17th floor. There's a cafe, super nice cafe. Order a coffee, get a pastry, and a sit down, and as I'm waiting, in walks Brian Pennick. It's probably 7:15 by this time. And he puts in his coffee order, and then he looks over and he sees me, and he V-lines straight for me. Hey, I'm Brian. What's your name? Oh, I'm Rich Plummer. And he's like, oh, Rich, how do you serve here? Now notice the language, the word that he just chose. How do you serve here? I thought, oh, sir, I lead your threat intelligence program. He's like, oh, you work for Rob Suarez and Liz Cosell. Yes, sir. He's like, man, I just want to tell you, you're doing a fantastic job. And I'm so proud of you guys and the team. Everything you guys are doing is just fantastic. So I just want to say thank you. And I was like, wow, just kind of blown away in that moment that, one, that he was so personable enough to come up and see me and talk to me, but then to compliment me. And being a person that doesn't accept compliments very well, I immediately changed the subject. And I'm like, oh, sir, this is my first time I've been in this building. Look at this amazing view. And he's like, Rich, I love this view. He said, let me tell you something. I come up here often, and I look out into the city, and I look out into those buildings, and it's a constant reminder that the people in those buildings, those are our members. Those are the people we serve. And I got tingles just like I have right now in my body, and I was like, wow, that's the kind of person I get to work for. That's our leader. And he doesn't just talk the talk, he's living it out. He is so connected to his why. And so that's where I want you to start when you build your threat intelligence program, is why? And are you truly connected to that mission and your why? And then after that, it's time to get to work. And it's going to be hard. If you're just starting your program, building one is not easy. You have a ton of challenges. But you might say, like, where do I even start? I bought this tool. What do I do with it? Like, I've got intelligence, right? I'm all set. This thing's going to tell me everything. I'm good to go. Well, you need to start with an assessment. And we're actually going to give you this assessment right here. You can download it from the university along with another document we'll mention in just a minute. But the assessment is going to establish a baseline of where your program is at today. And the best part about doing an assessment is that you get to see all the holes. Look at the red on that slide. This is when I first got to CareFirst. It was red. There was a lot of red on there. We basically went from 0 to world class in 90 days. And you can do the same thing, but it all started right here. And then 90 days later, redo the assessment. And you can see that now we're starting to check some boxes. Yep, we got this done. Okay, yep, we filled this gap. All right, now we have to work on this. So not only is it giving you a baseline of where you're at, every time you do an operations review with your executive leadership team, you can now show them the progress you're incrementally making in your program, which is pretty incredible, because what you're really doing is you're saying, hey, this program has value. Oh, and the return on investment, they can really see it as you're building out a slide. And it simply just follows the intelligence lifecycle. Pretty straightforward. One of the questions that the assessment is going to ask you is, do you have a cyber threat intelligence program plan? Now, many of you, if not all of you, probably have an incident response plan that clearly details how you'll respond in an incident. But how many of you have a program plan for your Intel program? And this document here will clearly define the goals of the program and how it will operate on a day-to-day basis. And as you can see by the table of contents here, it's got pretty much everything that you need in it. Your intelligence requirements. Who are your stakeholders? What's your team structure look like? And so when you go to the team structure, how many people do you really need in your program? I get asked that question all the time. Can we really support a huge company with only 2 analysts? At CareFirst, that's how we do it. I got Salita Bruss and Justin Bernstein. And then we've got 2 engineers. Actually, one slot's vacant right now. We've got James Brown, who's in the engineer spot for automation, because they're incredible. Well, how many people do you really truly need? What you really want to do in the program plan is also identify what their skill sets are. What are the gaps in your skill sets within the program? Do you really need a strategic analyst? Maybe you're not at that level yet, but you want to plan to say, you know what, in 6 months or next year, I want to be at a level where we can start doing strategic level analysis, and that means we need to bring on a person who has a certain skill set. And you can plan all that out, and then you can give that to your executive leadership team as the reasoning and justification as to why you want an additional headcount. Now, you're going to build things in parallel. So as you're doing an assessment, as you're building out the CTIP program, you're not waiting for one thing to get done. You're constantly moving. You're never standing still when you're building a program, because you're constantly waiting on somebody else to get something back to you. And this right here will take you forever, unfortunately. Some of these things are really simple to get. You should be able to get your domains, but I'll be honest. We've been at CareFirst for over 1.5 years now, and just last week somebody said, hey, have you seen this domain? And I was like, what's that domain? Like, wait a minute. We have over 150 plus domains, and I was like, I don't recognize that one. So that one got added in, and things like that are going to happen. And we just honor the struggle. Every single day we know that we're going to run into roadblocks, and when you anticipate that, it's not a big deal. We just go with the flow, add it into the program. But I want you to notice the key areas here in the critical asset inventory and how important these areas are. It's domains, IP addresses, your technology stack, your brand name, your third-party risk, and then your executive protection piece. Okay. Those keyword areas can turn into standing intelligence requirements, which means they don't ever have to be changed. And then you can add in priority intelligence requirements down the road. But you're going to want to start this early, because this is going to take a long time to get through, right? So define the operational environment. What is it you're trying to protect? What are your critical business functions, and what technology are they built on? So if you don't know the technology stack within the environment, and if that server goes down, what's the impact to the company? And you may have to work with enterprise risk management in order to figure that out. But that's how you start integrating intelligence into every aspect of your company. In the CTIP, you clearly define who your stakeholders are. So it really comes down to this question is, who do you serve? Because you're not really working for the company anymore. When you build a threat intelligence program, you are now providing a service, and you now have clients. We just call them stakeholders. So you want to interview each of those stakeholders and clearly define who they are, and then ask them a question. How will you be satisfied with the intelligence support that we provide you? What does success look like? What are your success criteria? And if you clearly define that, and you understand how they want that intelligence delivered, because the SOC manager is going to want it differently, right? He's going to want a more automated function. He's going to want operational level. You get up to the executive level, you're going to want a more strategic level product, right? So once you're in these interviews and you understand their needs, you can move into the intelligence requirements and start defining those. And in the CTIP template that we're going to get you, again, you can download this from the university, and you can take it, implement it right away. And you can see how we've made this really quite simple. Instead of saying something like, what are the risks to our domains, and understand the threat actors' motivations and intent, or like a very military-like intelligence requirement, we tried to write something that was a little bit more executive-friendly so that they could understand it based off of risk. And then we've broken it down into several different key questions. But those are, I think, standing. You could basically come up with 7, I think that's what I have in the CTIP now, about 7 standing intelligence requirements that any company in the world can implement right away, because it's the same thing as those keyword categories. And if you understand those keyword categories, you also have played around in Recorded Future, and you know that there are watch lists that go by domain, IP address, technology stack, the most important things that your program needs to monitor in order to have a real high-functioning intelligence program. But there's more to it than just putting those numbers in there and then looking and waiting for alerts to come back on that. You really need to take your time and develop out the threat landscape. So when you look at the threat landscape, it's ever-changing, and we talk about it all the time, but the reality is we've looked at the threat landscape for a year and a half. Salita is our strategic analyst, and she comes to me about 2 weeks ago and says, this is getting kind of boring. What she's saying is like, I'm just putting out the same product every single time, and I feel like I'm not adding any more value than when I first got here. And I'm like, no, the product is incredible. The threat landscape is what it is, but the reality is we keep on getting hit by the same threat actors who are trying to deliver the same malware, who are trying to, well, vulnerabilities change, right? But she's analyzing this stuff going, Rich, I'm just not seeing a lot of like variation. We're always saying the threat landscape changes. But you've constantly got to be monitoring this, and you have to look for ways to get a feedback loop going with your technology. If you can get a feedback loop going with your technology, for example, maybe there's a capability where an alert from your SIM might be able to go into a piece of technology, and the AI actually analyzes it and says, hey, this is part of your threat landscape. Once you prioritize your threat actors and your malware and your vulnerabilities, you can work with enterprise risk management again, and you can come up with a slide that looks a little bit like this, very high level for your executives. This is gold right here. This is actually an example, but there's a more tailored one that's on the public website at CareFirst, because we're trying to show that we take cybersecurity very seriously at CareFirst, and we want to show that our members that we're trying our very best to protect their data, right? And then from a technical level, you can have a more granular version. So instead of just saying nation state threat actors or initial access brokers, that sort of thing. You can actually start naming threat actors like TA569, that sort of thing, right? And then you can understand their motivations. Like for us, it's ransomware, right? That's the gig right now. They just want to get in, get your data, and then extort you, right? So you've interviewed your stakeholders. You've got a really good idea of what your threat landscape is. You've got some intelligence requirements. Now you're kind of getting into a level in your program plan where you're starting to build out your collection requirements. What is it that I need to collect in order to get the data that is going to allow me to analyze and answer the intelligence requirement questions? When you do this properly, you are now setting the foundation for justification to purchase your tools. A lot of this is missed because a lot of you probably went out and bought a tool and then said, man, I need to build a program around this. Whereas if you built a program, you would have identified collection requirements and then said, wow, we need to go find a tool that can actually meet these requirements. We have a huge gap. Now that's clearly understood by executive leaders as to why you're asking them for a ton of money, for a ton of different tools, but you can clearly show why you're doing it. And those collection requirements are centered around the malware, the threat landscape, the vulnerabilities in your technology stack, and the threat actors that are targeting your company. All right, so I went a little too far there. Collection requirements, collections plan. Here we go. Collections plan. So you've justified, here's the requirements and the tool that I need. So now you actually have something you can base off of, maybe the competitors out there want to say, here's what we can offer. Okay, here's what we can offer. All right, well, here's our requirements. Yep, so you start checking those boxes off. You say, yep, this tool meets all of our requirements. Great. Now let's build out the plan on how we would implement that technology. So you're going to map your collections plan back to the technology, which supports you, again, return on investment, and why, the justification as to why you need that technology in your toolbox. And I do recommend a toolbox approach. I do need to make one little legal disclaimer here. Not endorsing any products on the next slide. I like my job, I want to keep it. These are just my opinions and those of CareFirst, not those of CareFirst. So on the collection side, you have a collections plan and you're able to just clearly show, hey, here's everything that we use on the collection side to feed our program, to answer our intelligence requirements. And as you mature, you might think, man, Recorded Future is doing great, but I just want more control over things. I want to add some more stuff in. Maybe you liked, like, for example, Feedly here. We like to use Feedly because it quickly allows us to pivot and just go scrape something, versus some of you might actually write your own code and scrape your own websites, which is great too. There's no wrong way of doing any of this stuff. But whatever technology you put on the left side into the collection piece, you just want to clearly show why it's there. It's justification. And then how are you going to process that? So we're moving through the intelligence lifecycle still. And you may have a SOAR. You may not have a tip. You may not even understand how to get value out of a tip because your program isn't mature enough to even handle a tip. You may not have enough feeds coming in from multiple sources that you need an actual tip for, which maybe is why you bought Recorded Future, because it checked almost all the boxes that you needed. And it did for us. It was one of the first tools that we implemented along with a tip. And we chose Threat Quotient because it allows us to have some granularity of control, which I'll talk about in just a second. But remember earlier how I was talking about the feedback loop with your technology? So we talk a lot about collections and getting outside stuff in. But what we don't talk about is how do we get the inside stuff to match up with the data within all of our other stuff that we're collecting. And so last year at Predict, they introduced this collective insights. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. And I was thinking about, like, we need to get this implemented. So the first thing we did was started dumping anything and everything that we could in here. Our EDR is in there, our SIM is in there, our Proofpoint TAP is in there because I love Proofpoint. I think it's a fantastic tool. But how do we get that data into one spot and let artificial intelligence go, let me check that with some other things going on in the industry. Oh, let me check that with the sandbox submissions and see if we see anything else going on. Oh, this is pretty cool. Here's your threat landscape. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now I know that I need to worry about Cobalt Strike, or if there's that little toggle up there that says change over time, and I want to go to the last 7 days, now I can put out a weekly Intel product on the ever-evolving and changing threat landscape, and I can do it so easy. Whereas that would have taken hours to do by an analyst. And you're seeing it in like near real time as soon as that data is getting pumped over. And then some of the updates that they just did that allow you to see the changes over time. So now you can see an arrow watching where the threat actors are actually dropping motivation and intent or opportunity and intent. And it's like, okay, do we need to worry about this? Is this an emerging threat? And we have an emerging threats program at CareFirst as well. And so when we see an emerging threat, we'll pump it into the emerging threats lifecycle, which will start looking at, do we have a detection capability in place to see this if it were to come into our environment, just in case we miss something, right? But these are a great way to put out just a simple product. We put out 3 products at CareFirst. Really, I mean, we probably put out a little bit more than 3, but 3 is pretty standard. We have a daily intel report that Justin goes through every day, and he curates it, and he just weeds out all the noise, because there's a lot of noise out there. And your intel program needs to stay focused on what matters the most. It needs to stay focused on the threat landscape, the things that are most important to your company, not the noise. We're a regional company. We're not a world global company. So global events don't have as big of an impact on us. Depends on what it is. It's not that we ignore that stuff, but it's not a squirrel off to the side, like, oh, bright, shiny object. I got to go look over this. The war in Ukraine. Hermetic wiper is going to wipe all our systems. Well, is it really a threat to your company, or is it a threat to those that are over in Ukraine and other companies that are doing business with them? So your analyst should be able to analyze that and then weed through the noise and give you the stuff that's really important. And then we do a threat pattern report. The threat pattern report just shows the last 2 weeks of what we're seeing and the patterns that we're seeing within the threat. Real simple products that have a ton of value for the stakeholders, for the people that you're serving. And then finally, at the end of the month, we do an industry report, and we do an industry level threat based off of how the threat compares to CareFirst. So where we're sitting at within the industry trends versus how CareFirst is sitting. And then we fight like crazy for feedback. And we're constantly asking people to please give us feedback. Are we serving you in the right way? All that success criteria that you measured in the beginning, are we meeting that? Are we doing a good job? We like pats on the back. We want people to tell us that the work that we're doing really, truly matters. Otherwise, what are we doing? And so you really have to fight for this because nobody ever wants to give it, right? It's one of the hardest things to get. Now that you've put all this together, it's time to operationalize that intelligence. And Recorded Future makes that really simple. So if you're just starting out, you're going to put this in your program plan. You're going to put in an architecture diagram. This is what it looks like. This is how the data is coming into Splunk right now. Well, what does that allow you to do? It allows us to alert on threats from their watch list. And they also have a really great app, so you can do retrospective hunts on indicators. Low-level threat hunts, but threat intelligence is still informing that. Or you may want a little more granularity of control. And at this point, maybe you have more feeds coming in than just one. So maybe now you can utilize a tip. You really do understand your threat landscape, which means you can go into the tip and you can raise the threat level on malware and threat actors in near real time. Oh, we saw Cobalt Strike come in. Well, we already had that at a level 9, so that is automatically going to be sent to the firewall, to Splunk, down to the EDR, and we're going to do that automatically. So the key to actually maturing your program is to start implementing more automation, which is why you need a really good engineer who can help you build those automations out or utilize the technology. And when you get to what I would consider to be a world-class program, you're now taking advantage and you're utilizing every tool in your toolbox. You're using it to its fullest capability and potential. So on the left-hand side, we have the collective insights, things coming in from your EDR, from your SIM, from your Palo. Recorded future AI, taking care of that, giving us the threat landscape. We're spitting that out into a tip. We're taking all the other free feeds, premium feeds, whatever it is that we want to grab. We've got Feedly open source intelligence that we can flip on a dime and just say, yep, we want to create an AI model and we want to collect this data, and then it'll automatically feed into the tip, and then the tip will automatically score that data, normalize it, process it. The analyst doesn't really have to do much, but just make sure that things are functioning and working properly. And now we're kicking that out to the firewall, one of the most important ones, the EDR and the SIM. So near real time. And the best part about this is being able to show the boss, the executive leadership team. I had a lot of red on this slide when I first started because things weren't connected. And we weren't sure how we were going to operationalize everything. But every quarter we're doing these operations reviews, and I'm starting to check a box now, it's green. Oh, Rich, that one was red last quarter. Yes, sir, it was. And now it's red, it's green. And I'm so excited. And now we get to move on to something else. And then the day that this slide turned green, I was like, we did it. Like, we did what we said we were going to do. We started with the assessment. We saw all the gaps in our program. We knew we built a roadmap on how we were going to mature the program. And we clearly defined the goals and how we would operate on a day-to-day basis through the CTIP, the Cyber Threat Intelligence Program Plan. And then from there, we did it. We came to this. So there's one more slide left, and it's probably, this might be the most important slide in the whole talk. And it's, you have to make a commitment to yourself today that every single day, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how frustrated you are, that you will summon the very best of who you are that day, and you will give everything that you got. Because there are people that are really counting on you. There are people that you serve that need you to be your very best. That's all I got. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Cool.